Welcome back, Helldivers. It's Sakura. Okay, so yesterday we had some huge changes that affected weapons like the arc thrower, the anti-material rifle, the breaker incendiary, liberator penetrator, dominator, diligence, and slugger, and a couple more. I went through and tested a lot of these weapons, and I'm gonna be bringing that footage to you guys. But before I do, I had a great time when I got to the jar. It has definitely been upgraded, and it is noticeable. Let's see what the Dominator changes were. Okay, so the Dominator changes were increased damage from 200 to 300 and increased stagger. These changes are completely noticeable. It used to be an effective sidearm, well, really an effective, I'd say like a tertiary or secondary weapon, because it wasn't really the best main weapon. Really, you'd want to use like a machine gun or something that's a little more quick firing and that can get closer to you, can deal with those closer ranges. And that's still the case, but now it does its job so well that it can actually take that role as that, stratagem weapon, as that third weapon, while you bring in a machine gun type or a stalwart type for your main hand. So today I'm going to bring that build to you. Okay, so to start off the build, we've got the stalwart, of course, and what you're going to want to do with the stalwart is bump it up to its highest speed. This is pretty much the speed I keep it on unless I'm shooting long range, 50 meters out, 100 meters, that kind of thing. I'm going to bump it down to its lower speed, but when I am dealing with the horde, and you'll see in some shots in the background, I switch it straight to the highest speed, which I think is 1160. Let's go check. Yeah, it's actually going to be 1150 rounds. And then, of course, like for long ranges, 700. If you like 800, it works, but you're not going to get that same. You're not going to get that same effect. And what's going to happen when you get it up to 1150 is you get this kind of like laser beam effect. You can stop shooting it like a gun and start shooting it more like a laser beam. And what that means is you can kind of drag it along and point at your targets. You don't have to lift off of that fire, because there are so many rounds on the magazine along with that 3 extra that you really I find it hard to run out of ammo. I find myself shooting a lot more than I am reloading, and even when you do have to reload, unlike the machine gun and heavy machine gun, you can just start moving, start running, so you don't really need that protection, the same protections as you do with the bigger brothers of this gun, making it fit into a really nice place. I like to aim down sights most of the time with the stalwart, but there are some times when you can just keep your finger on the trigger and kind of just, it's almost like a lightsaber effect. Just swing it past your targets, especially the smaller guys, and they're going to go down. Like I said, you've got so much ammo, you don't really need to be worried about it. And with our next addition to the build, you're really not going to be worried about it. So far, we've got the jar and the stalwart, and we're going to round this out with the supply pack. The supply pack is an absolutely amazing addition to some weapons, not all weapons. Things like your flamethrower, all your machine guns, your anti-material rifle probably does a really good job with it. The supply pack, I may make a video all on its own. I think it's an extremely underrated stratagem, because what it allows you to do is essentially overcharge your weapon. So the entire time you're playing without the supply pack, you're playing as though you don't have infinite ammo. And what that means is you're not shooting as much, you're not putting down nearly as much lead down range. But when you start to realize, or when you start to feel the fact that you have almost a bottomless pit of ammo with the supply pack, the backup resupply, and then, when your timer runs out, you've got another supply pack coming in, then you start to shoot a little more. You start to really take liberties, and it kind of unlocks a potential of lots of the guns. And this happens with the jar, and it happens with the stalwart. So this is a wonderful 3-pack combination. I usually try and keep the synergies to 2, and then those 2 reach out to the other 2, but this is a 3 stratagem synergy that I think works wonderfully. I had a blast playing this build. I'm gonna go ahead and take it as far as I can, see if I can do a solo 9, but it can definitely do a solo 7 with these 3 pieces. But let's cover the other 2 stratagems. Now that you've got basically all horde clear handled, you really have to worry about those heavies, especially if you're going to take this one into solo. So what you want to do is you want to bring the railgun orbital strike and the 500k. As far as I'm concerned, these are the best non-handheld stratagems for heavies. These 2 together are some of the best heavy clear, elite clear stratagems in the game. It does take the orbital rail cannon strike to come back a little bit of time to come back, but in that time you can kind of lean on your 500s. If your ship modules are fully upgraded, you get 2 500 kilogram bombs and they come back in around 2 minutes, so that's 500 kilogram bombs everywhere. I think that's the build. The way you want to use this build, you want to, as I said earlier, forget about the ammo restrictions. You want to just, one, fire off your weapons as fast and as accurately as you can. So get in between speed and accuracy, especially when it comes to the jar. The stalwart really doesn't have much kick to it, so it's easy to handle. The jar, however, does have a bit of a punch, which makes sense. You do want to be regulating the speed at which you're shooting, and if you like the burst mode, I find that is easier sometimes. I would definitely try out all the shooting modes for the jar and the stalwart, and that's honestly the case for it. This is just a Helldivers tip. Always hold that R button, see what you're working with, change the weapon around. Some of these guns have completely different personalities when you change their fire mode, or you change something else about them, their scope, or you know, what have you. So what you want to do is when you're focusing on the armored targets, that's when you're going to break out the jar. It handles things like hive guards. It does handle bow spewers if you hit them in the butt because it has explosive damage. It does take a little bit of time to handle the bow spewer. I think this build is weakest against bow spewers altogether, but it can still handle them, and it can handle every single bug that you might find. And I will go ahead and test this one with bots later on, of course, but I feel like it might not be as strong versus bots, like maybe the stalwart itself. The jar could stay, the stalwart may have to get changed out, but we'll look into that. You're tasked with this build with handling all the smaller bugs, of course. Anything under a hive guard, or anything up to a hive guard, the bow spewers. When the charger comes, okay, break out the break out the railgun, or I'd say break out railgun first so you can start that timer, then next charger 500k. Really, you get more bang for your buck if you see more than one charger, kind of string them together and try and get the 500 to get them both. That is possible. It's a little difficult, but it will save you time and more payload that could be used later on in the match. So yeah, I think that's everything. Small guys, break out your stalwart. When you start to see those hive guards, those armored enemies, that's when you break out the jar. And then of course the bow titans and the chargers are going to be taken out by your rail cannon strike and your 500k. Also, I think it's important to note brood commanders, they can kind of get taken out by anything in this build. The stalwart can do it, especially at its 1150 rate. The jar can certainly do it. Make sure you aim for their head, and the of course, the rail cannon and 500 can do it, but I think the brood commander is a little bit too small and unarmored to lean on those heavier options, so maybe try and focus down the brood commanders with your jar and your stalwart. Well, that's it for this build, guys. If you like what you saw, leave a like, a comment, consider subscribing. Just tell me if you're going to use this build, if you have used this build, if you've seen this build before, and what do you think about it? Also, anything else that I could be doing that would make you guys happy. That's it for today, and until next time.